My view is that we should be doing things fundamentally differently. We should not be trying to sell something early. Candidly, I don't think you should create an expensive product until you've spent a lot of time with your fans, with your potential customers. And by that, I mean, you need to have really gotten into their heads before you start developing an expensive product.
Welcome to the Online Genius Podcast, where host and renegade thinking beer brewing lawyer turned online entrepreneur Bobby Klinck proves that building and protecting your online genius doesn't have to be rocket science. Bobby and his expert guests break down online marketing and the legal stuff so you can stop sweating the small stuff and get back to building your amazing business. Now, here's your host, Bobby Klinck.
Hey there. Welcome to episode 87 of the Online Genius Podcast. I am really, truly excited for today's show. And I know I say that every single week, but this week is different. This week is different because we're going to be talking about kind of what has become my passion. And one of the things that really sets me apart from a lot of the other digital marketers out there, a lot of the other online entrepreneurs who are, talking about the way they do things. I do things very differently from most of those people. And specifically today, we're going to be talking about what I call my fans framework. This is kind of the process, the way to think about and, put a framework around finding your 1,000 true fans. Now, that's a concept I've talked about before, and it's a concept that I think is important. And the number doesn't matter. I don't care if it's 1,000, if it's 100, if it's 50. But the point is that one of the big things that I have done in my business that has been a key to my success is that I have focused on my raving fans, on creating a raving fan base and serving the living crap out of that fan base and not trying to sell to them, not trying to get every last dollar out of them, not trying to do any of that stuff. Now, if you listen to last week's episode where I talked about my core beliefs, one of them is serve first. And so that's really important here, right? Is that in a sense, I believe in giving and I believe in doing all of those things. But more importantly, the big shift in my business came when I kind of systematized how I was doing this. And I'm going to be honest with you. This is another example of one of those ways where I kind of lucked into something. I didn't originally have this fans framework built in my mind as I was doing it. No, I did it. I was practicing it. I was out doing this. And then when I started thinking about, okay, well, what's the process I'm doing? What is it that I'm doing that's different from what most people are doing? And I want to be clear. A lot of this stuff is stuff that some of the people are teaching here and there. But to me, this is a framework of thinking about it from the get-go that's a bit different than what most people teach. And so when I kind of did that hard thinking and that work, that's when I came up with this framework, which is kind of a path if you think about it. And it's something where, candidly, you'll probably be doing a little bit of each of the steps at any given time. But theoretically, you're going to be focusing you should be focusing most of your effort on one phase at a time, because you're going to find that realistically, that's where you need to pay most of your attention, because that's kind of your weak spot. So you kind of start at the earliest point in the process. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And I'm really excited to dive in. But before we do, this episode, as always, is brought to you by the Online Genius Podcast community on Facebook. I love bringing these episodes to you. I love, kind of sharing what I've learned, bringing on guests and doing all of that stuff. But really what I love most is interacting with you, engaging with you, actually getting a chance to talk back and forth. And I can't do that on this podcast. It's just not possible. That's where the Online Genius Podcast community comes in. It's a place, it's a free Facebook group where you get in there and we can talk about all of these things. We could talk about the fans framework. We could talk about legal stuff if you have questions about that. We could talk about what I'm doing to build my business. We could talk about any of that stuff. Heck, if you just want to talk about craft beer, I'm happy to talk about that too. The point is, it's a place where we can actually engage with each other. And so that's what the community is. And I'd love for you to join me. You can do so by going to youronlinegenius.com/community. Again, youronlinegenius.com/community. You head there. It's a Facebook group. Just make sure to answer the questions, because we kind of use those to make sure that it's not a bot or anything like that. So if you answer the questions, we'll let you in. So I hope to see you over there in the community. Now let's dive in to this episode about the fans framework. Okay, before I actually go to the framework itself, though, I want to talk about what's different about what I do and pitch you on why you should want to be different, why you should want to be like me instead of like what a lot of the other people are teaching you. And I want to set up kind of a two different worlds. What a lot of people in the online space are talking about is creating evergreen funnels. And they believe the ultimate thing they should do is be able to take someone from cold, doesn't know who I am, bring them into some kind of funnel, either it's a webinar or an evergreen email sequence, et cetera, and then lead them straight to a big sale. So that's what a lot of people view as like the end that they really want to get to. Or maybe they think about the launch mentality. So this is kind of the other variant of that. It's people who are constantly launching, and each time they launch, they're going out and getting mainly cold audience because they're launching all the time. So, I mean, you can't email your list constantly that you're launching. So they go out and they're trying to find a cold audience, and again, take that cold audience to warm to buyers of like $1,000 product in no time flat. Now, that is possible. Each one of those things can work. But I'm going to be honest with you. Those are very, very hard things to do. Taking someone from the point of not knowing who you are to buyer of a high dollar program, and maybe it's $9.97, maybe it's $4.97. I don't really care, but I'm saying if it's more than about $97, if you want to take someone from not knowing you to buying that product in a very short period, it's a very, very hard thing to do. Now, if you get to be a master at messaging and can do things like, reversing people's thoughts, and I'm not talking about thought reversal videos, if you've heard that concept, I'm talking about breaking down people's beliefs by, kind of proving that their beliefs are wrong, et cetera. You can get to be a master at that. But what I'll tell you is most of the people who are masters at that have been working on that craft for years. And most of us aren't good at it, aren't really professionals at it yet. So you could do that, and that's one way to go. But the reality is that I see a lot of newer entrepreneurs thinking, hey, that's the way to go, because they see these other people, more established entrepreneurs who are either launching every 3 months and going to cold traffic, or maybe they do evergreen. And so these new entrepreneurs think that's what I should be doing, and that's what I want to be doing. And the results aren't pretty. The reality is that most of the online entrepreneurs who do this end up spending a ton of time, a ton of money, creating a product, whether it's a course or a membership or something like that. I don't really care which, but some kind of information-based product where they're going to teach people something. And they've poured their heart, their soul, everything into this. And then they go to launch and it's crickets. And maybe nobody buys, maybe 1 or 2 people buy, but it is crickets. And I can tell you from my own experience, I did this. I actually wrote an email a couple of times, never sent it, where I talked about, is there a number you dread? And the number I dread is $11,600. I think it's $51. I don't remember the exact number sitting here off the top of my head, but it's $11,000 and change, somewhere between $11,000 and $12,000. And that number sticks in my head because that's the amount of money I spent on Facebook ads leading up to my very first launch. And I had exactly one buyer at, I believe it was $697, but she asked for a refund on day 29, never having opened the course. So I lost $11,651 and change because I took this approach. Now, I'm weird. I tend to do things over the top. So most entrepreneurs, luckily, don't go that far. But I see a lot of people who spend $2,000 to get a course about how to create a membership or a course. They then, spend a bunch of money on software. Maybe they spend money on, some of the other things they need to create their product. Then they spend money on Facebook ads, and then nobody shows up. It happens over and over and over again. But also, candidly, sometimes people never even get to the point of launching. Literally, I think it was earlier this week as I'm recording this, or over the weekend, I don't remember which. I saw a post from someone in a Facebook group I'm in. She had been working for a year to develop a product, had shot all of the stuff, had created all of the PDFs, had done all of these things, and then was talking to her coach, and her coach said, well, I think you probably are going to need to change. I don't think that product is going to work. And the rationale was that the customer doesn't know they need that. They want something else. They don't want or need that. And that's another thing that happens quite often. Entrepreneurs, we tend to think we know best. And often we do. I mean, often we know what people who we can serve need. The problem is that people, our customers, don't know that yet. And trying to get them to believe that they need something that they don't think they need and they definitely don't want is not going to be a winning proposition. This is why you have to sell them what they want and deliver them what they need. The problem is, if you take this launch or evergreen mentality, you never get there. So what I'm talking about now, this is all kind of what the common practice is in the industry. My view is that we should be doing things fundamentally differently. We should not be trying to sell something early. Candidly, I don't think you should create an expensive product until you've spent a lot of time with your fans, with your potential customers. And by that, I mean, you need to have really gotten into their heads before you start developing an expensive product. Now, if you want to, create a lower dollar product, I'm all for that, right? Create, templates that people can get. I mean, for example, I know someone who makes a very good living selling social media post templates. Basically, she sells like things that you can just use and plug into your Instagram for a year. And I don't remember what she sells it for, but it's like, I think under $50 for a whole year. I mean, that's the kind of thing, hey, you're like, okay, people will want that, right? And so you don't have to spend a lot of time. But if you're going to try to create a course or a membership that's going to have a $500 or $500 or above price point, either for the course or for the membership for a year, then you really need to know your people inside and out. You need to know what they want. You need to know what their challenges are. You need to know all of that intimately. And so I am a big believer that the first thing you need to do is create your raving fan base. And once you've done that, that's when you offer a signature product that's a $500, $1,000 product, etc. And I've kind of gotten a reputation, I think, for being an anti-launch guy. I'm not against launches. Let me be clear about that. Now, for my template library, for my legal template product, I don't do traditional launches anymore because people don't want a launch mechanism. They don't want to go to a webinar about the legal stuff. But I'm not against the concept of a launch. What I'm against is the concept of I'm going to launch and I'm going to rely on cold traffic or maybe even people who've, viewed 10, or 25% of some videos that I've put out on Facebook. And we call those people warm traffic. They're not warm. I don't care what you say. If someone has just watched 25% of a video or two of yours, they're not warm traffic. What I believe is that we should be launching and we should be relying upon our truly warm traffic. And by that, I mean our fans, the people on our email list who are consistently engaging with what we do. And if you have an engaged community, and look, I use email lists because that's what I do. I know other people who do this on Facebook and have a very engaged community on Facebook. And if that's what you want to do, that's okay too. But my point is you need to build that tribe of raving fans. When you do that, you can literally send some emails to people and they'll say, yes, I want to buy. You can just, put it out there and say, hey, I've got this. Because number one, you already know what they're thinking. So you can get your messaging dead on. And on top of that, they're going to trust you already. And so they're going to be willing to take a chance on you. So that's kind of how I'm different. And what I'm going to be talking about in a second is how you can create that raving fan base. And my view is this is something that is ongoing, that we do constantly, and that we're constantly kind of tweaking and we're constantly improving over time. But if you do this, you'll be successful. And what I want to tell you is, although you may be listening and say, okay, great, what does Bobby know? Well, first of all, this has been the secret to my success in business. But also, the dirty little secret is when you look at the big name entrepreneurs who are doing these mega launches that we hear about and say, wow, if only I could do that one day. The reality is that most of their revenue is coming from one of two places. Either their existing list of warm audience, so they're raving fans, or through affiliates who are sending their warm fans to this person. They're not out there doing a bunch of cold traffic advertising during a launch and being hugely successful doing that. That's just the reality. I've seen behind the numbers of various people, and I can tell you they are largely, making their money off of the fans that they've built and nurtured, and then the affiliates who are sending them warm traffic. So this is what actually is the key to long-term success. So that's what I want to stress to you. So now that hopefully I've sold you on the concept of taking a fans first approach rather than a sales first approach or a launch approach or an evergreen approach. And with that, I want to talk about the fans framework. And I promise people don't believe me when I say this. The fans framework is an acronym. The fans part is an acronym. And it just came to me that way. I didn't actually, do this on purpose. I was writing out, the different steps on a board and it came out this way. And so there's 4 steps and I want to give you a quick overview, but then we're going to go through each one. Step 1 is find your fans. Step 2 is attract your fans. Step 3 is nurture your fans. And step 4 is serve your fans. So that's the general rubric. And like I said, if you are someone running a business, and once you get to the point that you already are have a bunch of offers, you're doing all of these at the same time, and you're iterating and you're improving. But the concept is you should start at the earliest step where you're not yet proficient and focus most of your efforts there. And that's what's going to make you successful. So let's start with step 1, which is to find your fans. And a lot of people, I think, here to say, oh, okay, that's simple. And a lot of people want to skip over this. I did this. I skipped over this. I said, I don't need to do this. But I use find your fans, and it is about finding where they are. But once you find where they are, you then go hang out there. And you hang out there and you listen. You're not talking. You're not trying to, be fancy. And, some people go into these Facebook groups and they do these posts that it's very transparent. They're just trying to do market research. You don't do that. You have to be authentic and genuine and just listen. And this is where, I did an episode a while back, and I'll put a link in the show notes to my Dream 100 idea, or the way I employ the Dream 100. And it's all about this. You find places where people are hanging out, whether it's thought leaders, for example, who have Facebook groups or, podcasts, etc. It could be a company that's doing the same. It could be a hashtag, but anywhere that you can go where you can kind of get into an existing conversation for your potential fans and then just listen. And this could mean a lot of different things. One, listening to podcasts from thought leaders who are serving your fans. You will get so much more from that, even if you are not their ICA. And I talk about this a lot. I listen to the Gold Digger podcast. I am not Jenna Kutcher's ICA, but you know what? I serve the same people she does. And so listening to her, and I know she has a very successful business. So I'm able to hear how she talks. What are the themes she has? What are, the concerns that she seems to be addressing for her listeners? Well, guess what? I can take cues from that. Now, I'm not saying I'm going to copy her messaging. No, but I get ideas. And I've told this story many times. It was after listening to one of her episodes, and I don't even remember what it was, but she was talking, I think, about like certain words. And I can't even remember what the context was. But one of the words she used was overwhelm. And she talked about this concept. And that was the first moment that it crystallized in my mind that a lot of my potential fans felt overwhelmed. And that was something that was useful to me because I'm one of those people who I don't get overwhelmed. I mean, sometimes maybe I miss things, but candidly, I feel like I'm at my best, and I'm working on this. But I often feel like I'm at my best when I've got 857 balls in the air. So to me, I thrive under pressure, under stress, under multiple demands. And so hearing people talk about overwhelm was this realization, those places where maybe I feel like it's fantastic and I'm thriving, other people end up overwhelmed. And so that's the first thing you should be doing. Find the podcasts, the YouTube channels, whatever it is of the thought leaders who are serving your people, and just listen, watch, whatever you want to do. And you're not doing it necessarily for you to learn, as a student. You're there to start picking up, what are they saying? How are they talking to your potential fans? And this is going to be kind of a clue to you in things that you might want to message. So that's the first way to find. Another thing is to get into free Facebook groups. Paid groups are better. I have a whole episode about using other people's Facebook groups and delivering tons of value in there. And then people will come flocking to you. You don't have to ask. You don't have to promote yourself at all because people are like, wow, this person is fantastic. But that works best in paid groups because candidly, paid groups are, people who are buyers. And by paid groups, I mean groups associated with courses, with memberships, etc. But even in the free groups, you can get in there and you can, hear what people are saying. And again, in free groups, often you have to sort through because you'll sometimes see just ridiculous posts. One of my mentors I was in, I saw a post in her group recently where, it was a get rich quick scheme. Someone was like, oh, I'm making all this, inbox me for more detail. You obviously don't pay attention to that stuff, but you see what the other people, the people who are being authentic, being genuine, are talking about in those groups. And you'll start to see trends again. And hopefully what's going to happen is that the different things you're doing in the find phase will align. And what I mean by that is what you see in those Facebook groups, the messages, the themes will line up with what you're hearing the thought leaders talk about. You should expect that, right? Because that would be a good sign that there is alignment. So hopefully you're seeing that. You can do the same thing with hashtags on Instagram. I mean, if there's hashtags that your fans are using, just reading the posts. Again, the concept is just to get it so that this is in your mind. You understand what people, what your fans or potential fans are talking about, what their concerns are, how they talk about their concerns, etc. Getting to that point, number one, it's crucial to understand how you're going to attract them and also the product or products you're going to develop, because that's the only way you can really get to the point that you know what your fans or potential fans want. So that's part of it, but it's also going to be literally in your messaging And what I mean by that is like you can start, picking up on those themes and using them in social media or using them on sales pages or using them in, invites when you get to the point of selling through a webinar or a product launch formula or whatever you're going to use, you're going to have this messaging ready. An example I have of that really came in handy was I listened to people, and by listening to people, I started to get that one of the things they said about a lot of, the tech, the legal, the financial is, I don't even know what I don't know. So it was this unknown problem. So when I was kind of, really getting up to, the point that I was really kind of having some success on the legal side of my business, it was because I keyed into that lesson or in that messaging and I started using it and helping people understand that. And so that's an example of how it's going to come in for your messaging. So that's the find phase. The find phase is find and then listen. And until you get to the point that you pretty much know what your messaging is, know what their concerns are, know like common phrases, maybe it's a dozen phrases that your fans use all the time, you're not really ready to focus anywhere else. Now you can do some of the other stuff, and I don't mind you trying to list build, which is in the attract phase, which we'll talk about next the whole time. But realistically, until you get the find and the investigations that come within the find phase nailed, you're not really going to be primed for success. So that's the find phase. The second step is the attract phase. You have to attract your fans. And attracting here has a couple of parts. Number one, it's getting them, getting their attention and then getting them into your world. So that's what the attract phase is about. So getting their attention is starting to create the content that really speaks to them. Maybe it's a podcast where if, for example, you know that your fans and potential fans struggle with selling and have concerns about launching to crickets, maybe you do a podcast episode about how you can avoid that. It's kind of meta here, right? Because I'm talking about what I'm doing now, but you get the point. You're creating regular content that speaks to what your fans and potential fans and future fans need to hear and want to hear, not just need. Really, it's not need, it's what they want. It's talking about the things they need. And that was kind of the idea of this podcast when I first started. If you haven't been with me from the beginning, it started as what I call a Trojan horse strategy. I would bring people on to interview them about business topics, and then I would offer a 5 to 10 minute legal tip, lesson, etc. at the end. So that was my idea, is because people, I was always at least smart enough to know people probably didn't want to listen to a podcast constantly every week about the legal stuff. And so I said, hey, I'll get them here for the marketing and the business stuff where I interview these people, and then I'll give them the legal stuff. Now I'm doing less and less of the legal stuff. I have a whole series of episodes from the summer of 2018. So you can go way back to that if you want to, go and listen to things like I've got one about copyright law, trademark law, setting up your business, all of that stuff I've covered. But now I talk about the marketing stuff because that's what I enjoy. But initially the concept was, hey, this is something they want, and then I'll give them a little bit of what they need on the side. But point is, you've got to be creating content, and the content is your regular weekly content, big piece of content, whether it's a podcast, a blog post, a video. I don't care what it is. You just need to be creating that. And then the second part of creating content is the social media. You've got to be creating social media that is going to get people's attention. And again, if you did the work in the find phase, you can do that. I mean, you can tap into those conversations on Instagram, for example, by using the hashtags and, using messaging that people are going to like. And in Facebook, you can then in groups start participating and not promoting yourself. I want to be very clear, but starting to get people to know who you are by serving, by providing value, etc. So that's kind of the generating traffic. And there's other things. If you have a budget, you can use Facebook ads. I'm going to do an episode at some point about my Facebook ad strategy because I'm a bit different than people. I basically put all my eggs in the list building phase. That's where I think most of us should be spending almost all of our Facebook ad budget. But even within that, especially when you're starting up, you have to kind of know some things about your fans, maybe figure out who to maybe target or whose audience to target, but also messaging, etc. But you've got to use it for that phase. But, the first part of Attract is get people's attention and have them start looking at you. And you do that through content and maybe through Facebook ads. But then the next piece is get them to raise their hand and say, yes, I want to be in your world. For me, that means getting them on your email list. Again, some people do this through Facebook. I believe Facebook is a valuable tool, but I believe it's risky to try to rely upon Facebook because they could change the rules tomorrow on you. As I'm recording this, one of the latest rules changes has just gone into effect that affects messenger bots. Pretty much we online entrepreneurs can no longer use messenger bots to send regular content out to people. You have to qualify for certain things for subscription messaging, which we don't qualify for. And that's an example. People spent a lot of time, put like a year and a half into building messenger bot lists. And then Facebook says, okay, well, if you want to reach them, you got to pay us. Sure, go ahead. So you can do that. But I believe the best thing for the Attract is to get them on your email list because you own it. And this is about having a great opt-in offer. And so it's about having a great freebie, which again, you're going to know what freebie to offer them based upon the work you did in the find phase. And I'm going to tell you, you may struggle at first. You may try a freebie and it doesn't work. And you're like, okay, I got to try a different freebie. And maybe you go through a few and ultimately you find what works. But you do that work and you find a great freebie and you need a great opt-in page, which has great messaging. It's pretty simple. You don't want to go overboard, but you want to speak to their pain points, speak to the obstacles they face, speak to all those things you learned in the find phase, and people will start signing up for your list. And so that's the Attract phase. In a nutshell, basically, get people to notice you, get them to come into your world. That should be that should be your email list primarily. And again, you want to, get followers on Instagram and get, people to like your page. Maybe I don't think liking your Facebook page is worth much, but if you have a Facebook group, get people into that Facebook group and, do that work and attract them and get them into your orbit. Then you move on to step 3, which is nurture your fans. And this candidly is where most people don't do a good job. This is where a lot of the launch first, the evergreen people, they just kind of ignore this in my view. And it's not just that they don't nurture them before they try to sell to them. But a lot of people I know who focus on launching, they will, get people onto their list during a launch by, spending on Facebook ads to get cold audiences into a launch, and they get them on their email list. And if they don't buy, they ignore them. They forget about them, at least until they're going to launch again. And I don't know about you, but I have this happen all the time where literally there's people who have not emailed me in 6 months. And all of a sudden I start getting a bunch of emails and I always have a sense, they're about to launch something. Guess what? If I haven't heard from you in 6 months, I'm probably not going to click on anything you send me now to buy. Maybe other people are different, but I'm not going to. The nurture phase is in many ways, this is the kind of the secret weapon of the fans framework. If you do this right, you take people from relatively cold, because yes, they've signed up for your email list, but they may not know who you are yet. You take them from that point to raving fans. And you do this in a few different ways. Number one, you start by really kind of giving them a curated experience at the beginning when they're on your list. So you don't just start randomly sending them the same emails everybody else is getting. You want to give them a welcome sequence, which introduces them to your world so they kind of get a sense of who you are. And even before that, the very first email, when you deliver the freebie, you want to provide value and actually, get into their head and convince them that you know something about them. Then they go through this welcome sequence, and only then do they go to your weekly emails. And notice I said weekly emails. Yes, you need to be emailing your list every week, and it should go with your weekly content, whatever that is. If it's a podcast, if it's a, if it's a video show, whatever it is. But every single week, you should email your list. And you need to work on making those emails fun and playful and light so that people actually look forward to it. And I know a lot of people hear that and say, I've never looked forward to anything. I'll tell you what, I have people who email me pretty much every week, if not every week, every other week. I will get an email from someone that essentially says this: Bobby, I don't read anybody's emails, but I love getting yours. And I read it every single week. Or maybe I get someone who says, hey, I don't get to read your emails every week, but when I do, they are so awesome. And I get messages like that all the time. So, if you're if you're like me, you might remember, if you're as old as me, you might remember like must-see TV. In a sense, you want your emails to become that same thing. And I want to be clear here. Most of the people who join your list will not fall into that crowd. I don't know what the percentage is. We've heard the 80-20 rule. I don't know if it's 20%, but it's probably around there. But your idea here is not to, turn everybody into a raving fan. It's to focus on your fans. It's to find your fans, nurture the heck out of them, and serve the heck out of them. And your true fans will feel connected to you if you're doing this on a weekly basis. Because let's talk about what you're doing there. Number one, by putting regular content out, you're then giving that to them and saying, hey, here's more value for you. So every single week, they're getting a dose of value from you. If it's a podcast, if it's a blog, if it's, a video show. And look, it may be that some weeks they say, hey, that's not for me. I don't need that. But most weeks, hopefully, if you're doing a good job, they'll be like, ooh, that's good. I want to hear, oh yeah, I want to see that. And so you're providing that value to them just by giving them the content. But if you do the emails themselves right, and I'm going to do an episode about this in the future, I'm going to do a whole standalone episode about creating addictive weekly emails. But if you do that process right, it's not just that they want the content. And what I mean is, I know there are some of you who are listening to this episode right now who are subscribed to my podcast. And yet you write me telling me that you love my weekly emails. So if you're not someone who's in that camp, let me break that down for you. Those people don't need my weekly email to get the content. They're already getting it. They enjoy my emails because the emails themselves are fun, are lighthearted, give them a chance to get to know me. And I'll tell you, they're not always. One email, I, basically wrote an email, and it's one that literally, if I go back and read it now, I cry a little bit during it because I told the story of my father and my uncle being in a plane crash right before the beginning of my third year in law school. But the point is that my emails give people a chance to really get to know me. And that's the first step in the know, like, trust factor. And so if you do that, and if you nurture people, what starts to happen is you start to get people who are writing you and saying, that they love your content, but also then start to say, when can I buy your, and then fill in whatever your signature product is. Once you have a signature product, they will be asking you when you're going to open the door. You don't have to ask them and try to convince them to buy. They're saying, when can I give you my money? That's what the nurture phase is about. And that's what so many people are missing in their marketing. And so it's done through the weekly content and the weekly emails. And you know what? Also through the social media work. And what I mean by that is if you continue to show up in places where your fans are, and let's say they're on your list, but they're also in these other Facebook groups, and they see you delivering value there, that just accelerates the process. Because they see you doing that and they know you're doing it and just serving, and it's helping them, and it just makes you into a magnetic personality. So the nurture phase, this is it shouldn't be a secret, but it almost is the secret weapon for the fans framework. If you do that part right, things will fall into shape. So that's the third step. That takes us to the fourth step, which is serve your fans. And here I'm using serve to talk about selling and then serving people who actually buy from you. And I use serve here intentionally because I know a lot of entrepreneurs, and I was like this for a long time. we don't like sales. It just makes us queasy. And it's because we've had bad experiences, right? We've all dealt with the used car salesman who we know just wants our money. That person doesn't care if the car is right for us. They literally just want our money. And we've had that experience. And so that's what we think of as sales. But if you have a product that is good, that delivers what they want and what they need, you honestly are serving your fans by selling to them. And I know that sounds cliche. And I know maybe in your mind, you're like, okay, great, whatever. But I've made that shift. And I made that shift partly because I got to the point that I started telling people, no, don't buy my product. Or instead of mine, why don't you go look at this person? Literally, I send people to a competitor or someone who other people would see as a competitor to me because, for example, it's someone who is like a health coach and has a very specific health coaching question. I'm like, you know what? There's this other online lawyer who is also a health coach and used to be a healthcare lawyer. She can probably help you better than I can. And when you start doing that and telling people not to buy from you when it's not right, and doing that right, you will know that when you sell to people, you are in fact serving them. And so it's that. But it's also then you over deliver. And that means you give them value, you wow them, etc. And what I'll tell you is often you don't realize that you're capable of doing that. And let me give you an example of that. As I'm recording this, so I about not quite a month ago opened the doors to my Fans First Society, my membership. It's my first non-legal offer. And the concept is basically teaching this framework to people. So shout out to my Fans First Society members because they're hearing this and they know this framework already. But it's about this and I've got the core content, but then I also give them monthly trainings. And I'm recording this in July. And my July training was about list building. It was like list building 101. And to me, it was like a crash course. I mean, it's not a, 5-hour training with 18 different parts. I just went over the basics. But one person in the group posted that literally the training that I had about an opt-in page doubled her conversion rates. Literally, she implemented it and almost immediately her conversion rate doubled. And again, it was stuff that to me doesn't seem all that, important. But you have to realize that wherever you are in your journey, your fans, there are things that are second nature to you that are not second nature to them. But the point is you need to make a purpose of over-delivering. And over-delivering to me means delivering great content, but also delivering great support, delivering great everything, the entire customer experience. And here's where this whole thing starts to become a virtuous circle or a virtuous cycle. If you serve the living crap out of your customers, they become your best marketers. You don't have to worry about attracting because they start telling other people about you and other people start coming to your world because they heard about you from them. And they become the people who are just like the ones who are helping you with everything. But also when you're serving them, guess what? You're finding out more about them. When you are serving people and actually engaging with them at a deep level in serving them as customers, you are going to learn so much more about what people need. And in that phase, then guess what? You're back at the find phase. I mean, you're not going back there, but all of a sudden, maybe light bulb goes off and you realize something that you didn't realize before. And by the way, this can happen in the nurture phase too. And let me give you a story about that. I released a quiz at one point that I called the traction test. It was about basically, the concept was how can entrepreneurs get off the hamster wheel and really start making progress in their business? And I tried it as a freebie and we couldn't get the messaging right. So I kind of didn't worry about that, but it had this great effect because I sent it to my existing list. And if you haven't yet taken it yet, you can just go to youronlinegenius.com/quiz and you can go through it and see what it is, et cetera. And you get a freebie, et cetera. If you're already on my list, You have to put your name in again, but again, no big deal. You're already on my list. But you get this, and it kind of walks through phases and information about where people are in their business, and then gives them a prescription. Here's what you need to focus on. And in doing that, I learned something hugely valuable about my fans. The thing I learned was that my fans were not consistently building their list. I thought they would have been, because I felt like I had a lot of overlap with other thought leaders who are really teaching list building. And so I just kind of assumed that the people in my world were doing that. But I discovered that it was like something like 93% of my people who took the quiz were adding fewer than 10 people a week to their email list. And to me, I said, ooh, we need to talk about that. So it gave me this idea of, okay, I need to serve. Here's how I can serve people. And so you get the point that all of a sudden in the nurturing and the serving phase, you're going to get more information, which, helps you in the find and the attract phase, right? Because all of a sudden I know, hey, this is a rich area that I can, in fact, help people with. I can attract people with freebies on this. I can do all those things. So again, that's how it becomes this virtuous circle of, each phase affects the others. So again, the 4 phases: find your fans, attract your fans, nurture your fans, and serve your fans. And again, my prescription to you is go out and say, where are you in this phase? If you are, if you've done the work of understanding your fans, but you're only maybe getting 10 people a week or 30 or 50 people a week on your email list, you need to focus on the attract phase. That's where you need to be putting most of your effort. Now, you have to nurture because you want to make sure that people who are already on your list continue to be served, but you want to put a lot of attention on attract because you want to get to the point that you're getting triple digits, at least 100 new people net per week on your list. And it depends on what niche you're in. I mean, if you're in some niches, you need to be getting more than that because conversion rates are low. The traditional thinking is that a business to consumer offer, you're going to get leads cheaper, but they're going to be less likely to buy. So you have to get more people on your list. Where I am in the business to business online entrepreneurship space, getting leads is tough, but people are more willing to buy. So, they have a business. So they obviously are primed for that. And so if you're in the business to business, 100 people a week should be your goal. And that's net after unsubscribes. And if you're in the other, you need more than that. I don't know that I candidly can't give you an exact number, but I would want to be getting multiple hundreds each week if I were in a business to consumer space. And so you need to do that. If you're not there yet, focus there. Now, if you are there and you're doing that, you need to focus on nurturing your list. And nurturing your list is getting to the point that you get people writing back to you saying, I love your stuff. I love your emails. I look forward to them, etc. Because that's when you truly start to know. And also getting comments about the content. Like in my case, the podcast, getting people talking about how they love this. I don't remember how many episodes ago it was, about 10 episodes ago, someone, created this like sketch art thing and sent it to me. That was fantastic. And you're like, wow, okay. So people are really loving this stuff. So that's what you want in the nurture phase. And then you move to the serve phase. So you get the point, focus on the earliest stage and you'll be successful. But my bigger point here is even if you didn't focus on any particular phase, if you just committed to doing these things, including the nurture phase, you are going to be successful. So that's the fans framework in a nutshell. And I encourage you to adopt this. And I would love to get a chance to engage with you. So join the community, the Online Genius Podcast community on Facebook by going to youronlinegenius.com/community. You go there, we can interact, we can talk about this. I'd love to hear what you're doing. If you have interesting ways to nurture, I would love to hear about it because that actually is the thing I love the most. I love the nurture phase. And so I would love to talk to you about that more, but I'm happy to talk about anything else as well. So I'd love to see you there, but my call to action to you today, take the position that you are going to focus on creating your raving fan base. If you do that, you're going to have a successful business. So that's it for this episode. I'll see you back here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of the Online Genius Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Online Genius Podcast. Make sure to tune in next week for more great tips, tricks, and strategies to help you build and protect your online genius.